What's going on? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks for Sports Illustrated over on Fan Nation. I'm joined by my co-host this episode, Reubenking. He's a reporter for us at Ducks Digest. Rube, how we doing, man?
Doing great, Max. It's great to finally be back with you, talking some Ducks football. I think the last time we talked, it was mostly basketball, and it feels like it's been a while since we've talked, live on the YouTube. So happy to be back.
Definitely, man. It's, you were texting me just the other day saying, hey, we should probably get some spring football coverage going soon, or like preview stuff, because March 10th is the first day of spring practice for the Ducks. So we're definitely going to have plenty to talk about. On this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast, we are going to be talking about the quarterback room out there in Eugene. I don't have my usual setup. I'm in Los Angeles right now. So we're going to have we're going to be talking about the quarterback room heading into spring football on this episode. If you guys are watching this live on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres, thanks for stopping by and spending some time with us talking about the Ducks. Hope my internet can hang in there for me this show. Definitely hop in the live chat and throw some questions and comments our way to kind of get the discussion going a little bit. But, Dylan, it's the quarterback room. I feel like it's the one position that we never, don't have enough to talk about. So I think, heading into spring football, we're looking at an interesting situation for the Ducks with Anthony Brown exhausting the last of his collegiate eligibility, and then some pretty young faces in that quarterback room.
Well, I think, going into this season, like you said, you knew Anthony Brown was wrapped up. They had Tanner Bailey in the fold, and then he opted to transfer once Cristobal left. And then you were just kind of left with Thompson and Jay Butterfield. And I feel like a lot of Oregon fans were really excited about that, just to see who kind of, gets the edge and pulls, separates themselves from the other. And me personally, I was really excited. I expected maybe another 2022 quarterback or a transfer quarterback. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a guy that had been a 3-year starter and was going to have, 2 years of eligibility like a Beau Nix. So, we've talked about it a lot throughout the offseason, throughout the last couple of months, how Beau Nix kind of felt like a move out of left field a little bit, just because you wanted to see, maybe them prioritize one of those young guys and get them out there. But, they go with the guy that's got 3 years of experience, a guy who, has played against some of the best defenses in college football. And now it's this sort of 3-man battle. And I say 3-man because a lot of people are just seeming to pin it against Beau Nix and Thompson, when in reality, Jay Butterfield, in my mind, has just as much of a chance as the other two. And so now you have to see, what does this coaching staff do? And you tweeted out a question from Ducks Digest about, what should the new staff prioritize in spring football? And I think one of them is how to judge the quarterbacks. Do you go from what some of the guys on the team have told you about Ty and Jay, or do you start completely from scratch? Because Dillingham knows Beau Nix very well, having coached him in his freshman year during his best season at Auburn, might I add. And now, you have a whole new coaching staff, whole new offense. So you're kind of starting from scratch at that point, but you kind of come in with some, opinions and some knowledge about these guys. Do you go in and just, hey, let's look at these guys on the field, regardless of the name on their back, and see who comes out on top? Is that what they prioritize, or do they rely on that experience that Cristobal did with Anthony Brown?
That's a really good point to kind of, peel back the layers on this competition, Dylan, because I think you saw what relying on experience did for Mario Cristobal. He thought he had the best option there, and maybe he might have been. We have hardly been able to see Ty Thompson since he's been here at Oregon. So for all we know, maybe Anthony Brown was the best option. But I think what so many Duck fans are upset about is that we didn't even get to see Ty really on the field, even in the blowouts, even when there was no chance that the Ducks were going to get back in that game. Cristobal just wouldn't put Ty in. Or Jay Butterfield or Robbie Ashford. Obviously we've seen Robbie Ashford transfer since the offseason started, but I think just the fact that the quarterback position is another storyline for Oregon itself heading into spring ball is kind of surprising, just because I feel like, I don't know, even though you're obviously bringing in new quarterbacks every cycle, The Ducks didn't get anyone out of high school this time around with South Carolina, like you mentioned, but it just feels like it's strange that we're heading into another season and the Ducks don't have the quarterback position figured out. I think that's a luxury that a lot of other teams, really get to enjoy. And if you look at Oregon, they obviously had Justin Herbert. He was the best quarterback they've had in recent years. And then when Marcus Mariota was here, I feel like during their careers, like there were seasons that they were able to just enjoy where it's like, okay, we're going into the next season and we know Marcus is the guy. We know Herbert's the guy. But I think what's so, big picture about this is that it feels like Oregon's really just a quarterback away.
Yeah, and I totally agree. We've talked about stability, how important that is for a program. And we talked about it with the head coaches when we were talking about the transformation of Oregon football, how they had 3 head coaches over 30 years. And the quarterbacks in recent years, that's definitely played a big part of their success. And it's just kind of just been this carousel of other quarterbacks, aside from Mariota and Herbert, with guys like Vernon Adams. Obviously, he had 1 year. Anthony Brown, Tyler Shuck, Dakota Prukop, dare I mention, Braxton Burmeister. You just have all these guys that, it's hard to win when you just are plugging and playing a bunch of different guys. And we've talked about it quite a bit, how, do you just keep recycling these transfer quarterbacks and try to go for the guy with the most experience? Or do you try to get the next Mariota or the next Herbert? Because you've seen what, these quarterbacks that they recruit can do when you give them a couple years to start. And Anthony Brown had 2 years, but he didn't play until the Pac-12 championship game and then again in the Fiesta Bowl. So he really didn't have 2 years of starting experience. Maybe if he started day one in 2020, maybe things look better in 2021. So I really think that it's important to develop those guys, and get them a couple years, because now in the day of the transfer portal, if a guy doesn't get the starting gig in 2 years time, maybe it's time to start looking elsewhere. That's just the name of the game now.
Development's a big part of this conversation, Dylan, because I feel like that word gets tossed around all the time. Definitely want to hit on it on this episode of the show, but I think one of the other kind of overarching themes that I wanted to talk about that I kind of alluded to is Oregon being a program that is just one quarterback away. I think when you had Marcus, you obviously got to the first college football playoff, but I feel like they were just kind of all out of funk in that game. The offense was having some issues and they couldn't stop Zeke for the life of them. So even if Marcus did play better, who knows if they would have been able to stop the bleeding on defense. But when you had Herbert here, we talked about how when he got introduced, to the college game, it was in 2016 when they were just getting absolutely destroyed by Washington, and the Dakota Prukop experiment was just an absolute nightmare. So then they're like, okay, well, who else do we have on the roster? Okay, let's give this Herbert guy a shot. It wasn't so much an instance of, wow, this Herbert guy is just undeniably talented. We need to get him on the field. So I think it's just weird because the brand of Oregon football has elevated, during the Cristobal era. And then obviously there's a lot of momentum heading into the Lanning era. But that I don't think that, it's a school that's at least currently really known for strong quarterback play, which I would imagine as a fan is pretty frustrating when you're seeing some gems come out at other positions.
For sure. Kayvon Thibodeau on defense, Noah Sewell on defense. You have some of these stars, CJ Verdell, Travis Dye. You've got some of these stars that have just been coming in. And I totally agree that they're kind of that consistent quarterback away. Because you saw Anthony Brown, people will argue that, they were a 10-win team and he won them games and that kind of stuff. And of course, you can't really put wins on just the quarterback. I don't think wins are a quarterback stat necessarily, not in my mind, but if they were to have a guy like a Justin Herbert or a Marcus Mariota on last year's team or in 2020, on that team, how good can that team be? I feel like if you put Herbert or Mariota on last year's team, you could be talking about a college football playoff, because there's just so much talent around them. And it just felt like the passing game has just been so underwhelming. And I feel like if a Beau Nix comes out and, he starts tearing it up, or, if they give it to Ty Thompson or Jay Butterfield, and they tear it up and they start playing elite football, I feel like that's just going to give the Ducks the national spotlight that you usually see with Herbert and with Mariota, because that's front page news when a program like Oregon has such an elite quarterback, an NFL level, NFL caliber quarterback. That's front page news. I feel like there's a little bit more buzz around Oregon football, and that picks up on the recruiting trail as well. Like, hey, if I can play with a guy that they develop like a Ty Thompson or a Jay Butterfield that they recruited and is coming in and just dotting it up out there, then I want to play for that offense too.
I want to talk about the Justin Herbert era real quick in that 2019 season, because it feels like that's the last quarterback that Oregon hit on, or that was really prolific, and I feel like kind of matched the level of play that a lot of us expected. Because I don't know if this is like too crazy of a conversation, but just as you were talking, Dylan, I was kind of thinking, okay, the 2019 season versus last season, wheels fell off against Arizona State in 2019, and that's ultimately kind of what really cost them that playoff berth. And then last year, you have a bunch of guys banged up all year, pretty mediocre quarterback play, and then, but you see them hanging with the likes of the Ohio States and really being able to have that depth that you need to compete with these top tier teams. So I guess I wanted to bring that up because it's like which year did it kind of feel more like a one-off, if that makes sense? Because Justin Herbert was great at a pretty good, I don't even know how, I guess that's a conversation itself. Like, would you say he was good or great at Oregon after seeing how hampered he was by the offensive system? Where does that conversation kind of lead us? Because if you have Justin Herbert on this 2021 team, do you think that you have enough confidence in that defense to make a run? I don't know. That's kind of a cool hypothetical that I feel like could lead to some cool conversation.
Yeah. I feel like Justin Herbert's potential was not touched during his time at Oregon. I think you definitely saw all the flashes. You definitely saw the bits even early on of like, hey, this could be the guy. Early on, you can't really expect a guy to completely take over a program in his freshman, sophomore year. But going into his sophomore year, he was the starter. And it was just kind of in that 2017 year, it was kind of just like, hey, he's started before, let's get him out there sort of thing. And then he got hurt and they put Braxton Burmeister in. And then, that 2019 year, Herbert, all the NFL talk just exploded. And, but at the same time, it just felt like the offense was not quite what you would expect for a guy with his talent, if that makes sense. And a lot of the talent around him was sort of lacking. There was a lot of drops. The offensive line play, especially in 2018, was pretty inconsistent. 2019 was a lot better. But I definitely think that, there's you look at the numbers and you say, hey, this is an NFL quarterback. But when you watch the film, it just, it kind of tells a different story. Because I know there was a conversation not too long ago. Miami fans were talking about like, hey, Justin Herbert is, a guy that can put up, 4,000 yards and, 30 plus touchdowns. I don't know if he touched 4,000 yards now that I think about it at Oregon, but I know that, they were talking about like, hey, he put up crazy numbers and he was, an NFL caliber quarterback even before he came back for his senior year. Why are people saying he got held back? Why are people saying like he didn't reach his potential? And it's just, you watch those games and you just feel like he could have done, I guess I shouldn't say he could have done, but
the team, the offense,
the team could have done a lot more to help him. So to answer your question, I feel like in terms of talent, he was more towards the great level. I feel like the production you got though was, I'd say top 3, top 4 quarterback in Oregon history. But it could have been closer to a number 2.
I also think just another thing that made him so unique, especially now seeing him in the NFL, is like it feels like he has that it factor. Like, I'm not saying he's on the level of like, Brady or Rodgers, like with like the game on the line kind of a drive, but I think that's another thing that, Oregon hasn't really had in a while is like how much faith do you really have in the quarterback, when you have to put him out there late in games to kind of, win you a game or get you back into a game if you're kind of in a hole. So that's another characteristic of a quarterback that I think we haven't really seen at Oregon. And part of kind of just the last thing I wanted to say before we kind of talk about these guys specifically, I think that'd be a cool way to organize it, is just what we were saying earlier about how it doesn't really make a lot of sense that Oregon hasn't had a prolific quarterback super recently. I mean, I'm not saying that Justin Herbert wasn't good, but to your point, we just saw he wasn't even close to hitting his potential now that he's just balling out in the NFL. So when you see them recruiting elite guys at all these other positions, and then they have recruited the highest rated quarterback in program history in Ty Thompson, but you don't even see him on the field. I mean, it's only natural for someone to be a little bit skeptical about, the quarterback picture. And I think that's probably where Oregon fans are a little bit, because, when you have all this talent in that room, but you're not putting it out to use, I mean, what good is it?
Yeah, it's like, let's not go through the Justin Herbert situation again. Let's actually develop a quarterback. And because I honestly, in my mind, I don't think Justin Herbert was really that close to like being a Heisman quarterback at Oregon. Definitely like a preseason candidate, but it just felt like, there were other quarterbacks that were just on this other level in terms of college production. Now, when you look at like the NFL stuff, that's a totally different conversation, because Herbert and Joe Burrow going into the NFL draft were like, not crazy far apart, even though the numbers were. But just like in terms of the throws that they can make and the talent and the decision making, the decision making was one thing that people got after Herbert for. But and now I feel like one thing that we need to talk about and give credit to is the Chargers coaching staff, just because they've obviously done a really good job. And I don't know if they're just tapping into this potential that Oregon completely missed. Like I feel like he's just this crazy talented quarterback that I wouldn't say that the Chargers were the one to develop him, like some people have said. I feel like he's just this unbelievably talented quarterback. And, at his time at Oregon, you never really saw a whole lot of opportunity for him to, like you were talking about, with the game on the line and just deliver. And with the Chargers, he's done that a lot over the past 2 years, where it's, he's down by a couple scores or one score, and he comes down and delivers. And, of no fault of his own, his defense was not very forgiving, especially toward the end of the year. So I feel like if he was in some of those positions more, because a lot of the games that they won by, a good amount, especially in 2019. But if he was in some of those games this year, like maybe even the Alamo Bowl, if Justin Herbert was out there this past year, when they got down, first of all, I don't think they would get down in that deficit in the first half against Oklahoma, but I just feel like they would have fared so much better if they just had a guy that you can count on. And I know Cristobal probably would have made the argument that you can count on Anthony Brown. I think we all kind of know the truth that, there was a lot to be desired with that Oregon offense under Anthony Brown. And Justin Herbert is, there was a lot left to be desired too, but you want to get a guy that has that level of talent and bring out a Marcus Mariota level of production, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then also just when you're looking at the quarterback picture, like to have a guy like Jim Moorhead who's known for working with quarterbacks, and then that's the product that you get. I think it just raises some questions for last year. How much freedom Moorhead had to do what he wanted. What was Anthony Brown the guy that Moorhead ultimately wanted to be starting these games? And those questions are super worth asking now, because it's all in the past and we're on to 2022. But there's actually one question I wanted to hit on before we talk about these guys, because it's so important to this conversation, Dylan, about the quarterbacks. With the discussion of college football quarterbacks, I mean, even NFL quarterbacks, but a word that you always hear lumped into the conversation is development. So I think we should give our best shot, and then I encourage you guys in the comments, or if you're watching this on replay, let me know your thoughts. What does development mean to you? Because I think there can be a lot of different definitions here, and I kind of just wanted to hit on a couple things that come to mind for me when I think about development. I think at the day, the player leaves the program better than they were when they arrived. That one obviously seems pretty standard. And then Another thing to look at is, is this player capable of being an NFL draft pick or even a starter in the NFL? Because being a draft pick and a starter are definitely two different things. But you also see guys starting from, first round guys to mid round guys, even some late round guys start as rookies. So I think seeing if they're capable of contributing as rookies is definitely something as well. And then, is someone losing their spot to an underclassman, especially a freshman? I think in a lot of these top tier programs, you see young guys come in and they're really high caliber recruits. And if they're, panning out, early, then they're going to be pushing those veterans for their jobs. But I don't know. It's another interesting part of the conversation because some guys are so talented. You kind of wonder how much development is really done if they're just studs right away, as freshmen. So it's a really overarching topic in all of this, but we've seen some super, super talented quarterbacks, come through and play college football in recent years. Like Trevor Lawrence won a national championship as a freshman, I think, or maybe that was his sophomore year. But I know he got to the national championship really early in his career. So it kind of makes me think, okay, well, that's a guy that's just a stud. Like how much development did he really need necessarily, like as a freshman? And then you have Bryce Young, who waited a year, but it was behind Tua, who's an NFL quarterback. So, and then you have Joe Burrow. So I'd be curious to kind of see what people's thoughts are in years on as well.
Yeah, you were. I got the most of what you were saying, but your connection's starting to get pretty bad there. But I heard of most of what you said. I think you brought up really good points about leaving a better quarterback than they started, and I feel like once they make that leap from high school to college, it's rare to say that they didn't. Just because if they have a starting job, I mean, if they come in and they're a guy like Tate Martell and they're this crazy high rated quarterback and they've got this crazy highlight reel and then they come in and they just don't make an impact, that's a different story. But when they come in and they're a starting quarterback and they develop, they have a couple years like we're talking about, you hardly ever see them kind of either flatline or decline when they have a couple years. So I think like visual progress is one thing I would say. Like, are they working through the progressions more? Are they, avoiding mistakes more so than they were early on? Are they more comfortable in an offense? Now, granted, with a guy like Beau Nix having a bunch of different offensive coordinators, different head coaches, situations change like that. But generally speaking, when they have a consistent, stable coaching staff, stable team, just kind of trying to straighten out all the factors here, do they, avoid making those mistakes that they made before? And I feel like now in today's age of college football and the NFL and the NFL draft, it's hard to see a quarterback with, the 5 stars, the 4 stars that won championships in high school and all this stuff that, everybody says is the next this, the next that, the next great quarterback of Oregon football, for example, with Thompson is what a lot of people have said. It just, there's this crazy high expectation. And it's so hard to meet that sometimes when, you see the stars and you're like, oh, this guy is special. And you don't even have to, a lot of times people don't even watch the kid play and they say that with, and they see the stars like, oh, he must be good. People have watched him and they evaluate how good this kid is. They should know he's a 5-star kid. He's special. So, and that's fair, but stars aren't everything. Look at Marcus Mariota and Justin Herbert. Those guys were 3 stars and they were, Mariota won Heisman. Herbert's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And so for me, I think the answer kind of lies in nowadays. I feel like it's, can you be an NFL caliber quarterback by the time you're an upperclassman? Like, I feel like that's where you can tell that development has been done, because a lot like Trevor Lawrence came in and people were already putting him as a number 1 pick from his freshman year. Like that's, that was a kid that was crazy talented. And yes, he did win a championship his freshman year, to your question earlier. And so, like you said, I don't think there was a lot of development that needed to be done with him. Of course, the high school level is different than the college level. And then that's different than the NFL level, as he's probably gotten the rude awakening in Jacksonville. Some are more lucky than others. But I think that you have to kind of watch them progress. I think that's another thing. Like stats are one thing, but you have to watch, like, can this guy handle, a late game situation where they're down by 10, and can he strive under that pressure? Does he falter? Is he a turnover machine? Is he working to fix that? Like it's those little things as well that, kind of scream, hey, this guy's getting developed at this program to me.
I like what you mentioned about the kind of the intangibles and repeating mistakes. I think that's like one of the things that was kind of frustrating some people, I think, when they watched Anthony Brown last year, just to bring it back to Oregon, is you saw some really like kind of, gross, turnovers, interceptions, fumbles, whatever it might be. Decision making wasn't all the way there. So I think decision making has to be one of the biggest ones for sure. And then also looking at kind of how they developed as far as having mobility in the pocket, being comfortable, hitting their check downs or knowing when to take risks. I think that is another interesting part of it, Dylan, is like how willing is someone to take a risk, let the ball fly deep down the field or try to squeeze it into a tight window. But that's also somewhere we kind of see growing pains when people are trying to, throw it late across the middle or fire it into a window that there just isn't enough room, and seeing how their chemistry works with other receivers. I think those are all really important parts of this whole conversation around development. We could do a whole podcast on development, I feel like, just from what we've hit on here so far. But what do you say we get into some of these specifics on Oregon quarterbacks that are in Eugene now and on this roster heading into spring football?
Let's do it, sir.
All right. So starting off, I think, the biggest name that people want to talk about right now, or I feel like just is the topic of a lot of conversation because he's a transfer, Beau Nix, coming over from Auburn. I think that it's definitely one of those moves that makes sense, just seeing that they had so much youth in that room without him on the roster, with Robbie Ashford transferring to Auburn. It's kind of like a little bit of a swap, and then we also had DJ James and Jason Jones going back to their home states of Alabama. But Beau Nix had some really good plays over at Auburn, and I feel like, you kind of take the good with the bad. There's some plays where you're like, wow, that really didn't work out, but then you did take a risk. And there's like, I think about that once, I think it was a scramble that he had against LSU where he like basically went from sideline to sideline and then just hucked it up. And it ended up being a touchdown. But I think that's one thing I really like about him, is that he seems like he's a really gutsy player and he's not afraid to take those risks. I think that was one of the things that I was actually kind of high on Anthony Brown for from the limited sample size we saw in 19, was that he was willing to trust his arm and take risks, but that kind of evaporated in 2020. So I think his playmaking ability is, I'd say, right on par, if not higher than Anthony Brown's. I'm glad that they have someone that is dual threat as well, because I don't think it's a prereq, but I think that, a lot of these offenses in college football today really thrive on a quarterback when they have a quarterback that can, hurt a team with his legs.
I think Beau Nix, when I was watching some film on him, and mostly what I've been watching of him was that 2019 year with Kenny Dillingham, just to get a feel for his comfort with that offense, because that's probably the closest thing that you can relate it to what you're going to see next season. And obviously things are probably going to change. It's a different coaching staff, different program. So it's not going to be an exact replica for sure. But, just to see what he did with Kenny Dillingham. I think one of the things that I really liked most is that he is, like you said, a gutsy passer. He's a risk taker, but at times he got a little bit reckless. The decision-making was a little poor. Sometimes you wanted to see him check it down when he, try to tight it, fit it into a tight window. Sometimes you just want to see him throw it away, where he tried to do something with his legs and it ended up being, a huge loss. The offensive line that he had was a lot worse, especially last season, than what he's going to have at Oregon, hopefully, as long as everybody's healthy. On paper, this is going to be the best offensive line he's had. I think his receivers are also going to be probably the best, I'd say most talented that he's had. He had some really good receivers in 2019, but I'm talking about the ability of his receivers and his tight ends, like just that combination of pass catching ability and skill is something that he's never seen before during his time at Auburn. So I really think that he's set up with personnel, I think he's set up for success at Oregon more than he ever was at Auburn. And now you go to year 2 with Kenny Dillingham, where he's had different offensive coordinators. Of course, you're talking about year 1 versus year 4, but you have a little bit of consistency there and familiarity with your offensive coordinator, what his tendencies are, and what he likes to do in certain situations, and how he sees defenses and that kind of stuff. I think that's really important. But in terms of Beau Nix, I think his ceiling, I've said it before, I think his ceiling is way higher than Anthony Brown's was or ever would have been, in my opinion. I think he's a guy who never reached his potential because of the coaching at Auburn, sort of like what we talked about with Justin Herbert, maybe a little bit more, because we've never seen Beau Nix hit more than 2,500 yards, more than 16 touchdowns a season, more than 61% completion. Obviously, there's some accountability. I think he's, at times you want to see a little bit more accuracy. You want to see a little bit more explosion out of him. But at the same time, I don't think at the same, like we were talking about with Herbert, I think there was some coaching and some play calling issues and personnel issues where he wasn't set up for success at Auburn. And that's unfortunate for him because, his dad, I believe it was his dad, played at Auburn. It was like the school he always wanted to go to. And it didn't really work out beyond that first year when he won SEC Freshman of the Year. You look at his stats and you're like, this guy doesn't blow me away. But I think he's going to be a better product than Anthony Brown was. In the pro style offense, you're not going to see those design runs as much. I'm assuming it's going to be a pro style offense with Dillingham. You're not going to see those design runs like you saw with Anthony Brown, where you just kind of, spurts for 3-4 yards every once in a while. And then, every 3-4 games, he breaks off for a long one. And so I think, if he has to scramble, he's a very athletic, mobile quarterback. The offensive line's not going to put him in some of those situations where he's turning around, doing some Russell Wilson stuff, doing donuts, 10 yards backwards, and having to, like you said, huck it down the field and make some magic happen. I don't think you're going to see that very much. In the defenses, the competition in the Pac-12 defense, no disrespect to the Pac-12's defenses, but they're just not on the level of SEC. So after week 1, I feel like it's a big drop off in terms of the level of defense he's going to be facing. So maybe that helps. I feel like you can't really get any tougher than the Alabamas and most LSU defenses, and Georgia's, A&M's. Like, those defenses are the top of the top. In the Pac-12, they just don't really have those. So if Beau Nix is the starter, I know I'm talking as if I'm assuming he's the starter, but if he is the starter, I feel like you will get a better product than you had with Anthony Brown last season.
Yeah, I think that was another thing that I wanted to hit on a little bit, was just how the defenses he's gonna be going against in the Pac-12 are significantly worse than the SEC. So I feel like just knowing that, I mean, there's not really a defense except for maybe Utah that really, I think, gives you any kind of level of concern.
Washington, maybe.
Well, yeah. I mean, any given year, with Washington, but I mean, maybe their identity is going to be shifting more towards offense with Kalen DeBoer. But I mean, usually they had been one of the better defenses in the Pac-12, especially their defensive backs. But I feel like the level of defense that he'll be going against in Eugene with Dan Lanning, I feel like that's really going to help. If you just look at who he's going to be competing against, running away from the Noah Sewells and the Justin Flows, like, that's really going to help you. And then the big trench talent that they've added, I think that'll significantly help him, hopefully get closer. I guess Oregon get closer to the, practices are harder than games kind of a deal. I don't think that's the situation right now, but with talent that we're seeing coming, I think it's certainly in the realm of possibility. And then another point that got brought up in the comments that I thought was interesting, because we were talking about development. I think this comment from Eric, he said, "I'm worried Beau scrambles before he needs to, a savior complex, sorta, and it gets sloppy." That's another thing that I think is a mark of a competent quarterback, someone who's, has a good feel for the game. That was one of the things that I liked about Ty when we saw him in the spring game and in fall camp, is I feel like he didn't scramble before he needed to, because that's a combination of having the confidence in your O-line to protect you, and then also in yourself to stay in there and take a hit. if you need to let a guy run a couple more yards and get open. So I think that poise is definitely something that we've seen from some former Oregon quarterbacks, especially early on in their careers when you're looking at the Herberts and the Mariotas specifically. So if with Nix, I feel like that's probably one of the areas for growth that I think we could kind of pinpoint early here as we head into spring football. But like I said, or like I think we both kind of said this with this playmaking ability, it does come with some risk every now and then.
Yeah, I think the phrase savior complex, that's a really good way to put it. Especially early in his career. It just seemed like he was trying to make heroic plays out of nothing. And you saw that sometimes in the last season, where he kind of did some crazy things, but you can't rely on a guy to, do that kind of stuff, do some, Aaron Rodgers, Hail Mary kind of stuff all the time. So, but in terms of the base of what you're going to get from Beau Nix, when he's got time and a clean pocket, I really like how he moves through his progressions. I really like his ability to, put the ball in the numbers. I think he's got, not necessarily an outrageous cannon of an arm, but he's got, really good arm talent. And, it's just consistency with him, I think, is the biggest thing. It bounces around, his decision making one game to the next. You never really know sometimes. The offensive line play, of course, it depends on, one week you're playing Vanderbilt and the next week you're playing Alabama. It's the SEC. So, things are going to change. Things are going to be way, way harder. And in the Pac-12, on average, the defenses are kind of just that, average. And when you play against the Utahs and Washingtons, it's going to be a little tougher, as you saw. The passing offense against Washington last year was basically non-existent because Travis Dye ran all over him. And that's, I think, one thing that's going to be nice with Beau Nix is he's not going to have a ton of pressure on him to, be kind of that savior to play heroic, hero ball. He can rely on that run game, Byron Cardwell, Seven McGee, Sean Dollars, Jordan James. You're just going to have a better run game and a better offensive line to have some more options. So where you don't have to be, this guy to be, a 4,000 yard passer to throw it, 500 times. He just doesn't need to be that guy. And I don't think whoever starts needs to be that guy, because you can have a well-balanced offense, with whoever's out there.
A good offensive line and a great run game are a quarterback's best friend. I think that's how the saying goes. And it really feels like whoever ends up getting the QB1 job is going to be having that kind of in their back pocket to rely on. And then when you look at some of the weapons that Nix or any of their quarterbacks are going to have at their disposal, a lot of them are very young, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that, it really feels like it's kind of like an off season of innovation offensively for Oregon, with a young guy in Kenny Dillingham coming in, and then, a young guy or like a Ty Thompson or Jay Butterfield having a shot at winning the job. Is there anything else that you wanted to add about Beau Nix while we're talking about him before we move on to one of these young guys, Dylan?
I think the poise is one thing that you talked about specifically with this comment. At times you really see, him kind of step up into the pocket and be ready to take a hit. And at times you saw him run around and, just kind of freak out a little bit. So at Oregon, I feel like you like where Ty and Jay are at with that, at least from the limited bits that we've seen. The spring game, they showed a lot of poise and a lot of trust in their offensive line and in the receivers. And Beau Nix is coming into a program where he's going to have new teammates, and maybe that takes a little bit of time. In week one, you're playing against Georgia. I'm sure that defense isn't going to take a colossal step back after Dan Lanning leaves, and a lot of those guys go to the NFL. There's going to be a lot of talent on that defense, and you're basically playing in the Bulldogs' backyard in Atlanta. So, it's going to be a crazy test, and I don't want people, whoever starts that game at quarterback, I don't want people to say, oh, this isn't the guy, because he can't handle playing against the reigning champs, in their backyard. Like, if it's Beau Nix, whoever it's going to be their first start as an Oregon Ducks quarterback. And with Beau Nix, he's of course got that SEC experience, but he's coming back from an injury. It's a new program, new teammates, all that stuff. I'm not trying to create excuses, because I still think whatever happens, they have a pretty good shot at winning the game. on paper. I just think that you can't create all this judgment, all this conclusions based on one game against the reigning national champions.
Well, we got to see how Beau Nix and the rest of the QBs look in the spring game, and then as well as fall camp for that matter. Wouldn't surprise me if this quarterback decision is not made by the end of spring football, just with seeing how open it is. We're going to keep it rolling here on the Ducks Dish podcast, talking about our next quarterback in the Oregon room right after this ad break. All right, welcome back. We are moving right along now to the next quarterback in Oregon's QB room. That is really, I feel like, a big talking point of this offseason is Ty Thompson. He's a guy that came to Oregon in that 2021 class and enrolled early. You already know the accolade that he has kind of coming in, the highest rated quarterback that the Oregon Ducks have signed. With him, earning 5-star distinction on a couple recruiting sites towards the end of his senior season. I think just the biggest thing with him is that it feels like he has all the makings of a star quarterback, but we haven't really seen it with his limited play time. He came in against Stony Brook when Anthony Brown got shaken up, and then he came in a little bit against Colorado, I believe. But yeah, man, I just feel like it's not even so much that I think people want Ty to start. I mean, there's definitely a crowd of Duck fans that want Ty to start. Like that's like the argument that they're going to have with you. But I think really, man, you just want to see him get a chance. And I think unless you're in that locker room and, in the program, it's hard to tell, how open like last year's quarterback competition was. So I think that's one thing that Oregon fans are really hoping for is an open quarterback competition. And based on what Dan Lanning has told us is that it's going to be an open quarterback competition. So you figure with Ty being here all of last year and being an early enrollee, you think that he should, be able to make that jump heading into year 2 here. However, it is a new offensive coordinator and a new offensive system. So I feel like that's not really working in his favor. And, you could talk about that not working in the offense's favor just with the new coordinators that we've seen coming through Eugene lately. Just, again, Dylan, that theme of consistency that it really feels like Oregon hasn't had.
I think Ty Thompson, if he wants to get the job, I think he's got to do it from day one. I think he's got to separate himself from day one in spring and just say, look, I'm trying to be this guy. I'm trying to get better every day. I'm going to make this my program, because in all reality, it's going to be a huge battle. I don't think there's a lot of, with Jay Butterfield and Ty Thompson, it's really, really hard to tell who's going to come out from there, because they're both really talented and they've been with the program. Beau Nix has the experience, but I think in terms of the pure quarterback ability, it's going to be really tough to gauge who's going to be the number one guy to start. And one thing that I know you mentioned on your notes, and you just said that he played against Colorado. In my mind, he threw an interception on his first drive, and Colorado went back and scored in the fourth quarter. It was in the middle of the fourth quarter. They were up by 16. Oregon was up by 16. And they put Anthony Brown back in because I don't think they trusted Ty Thompson to finish that game. That was a mighty mistake, in my opinion. And then again in the Alamo Bowl, and maybe in one of those Utah games, honestly, I felt like that's a situation where you want to see your young quarterback and get him some of that experience, because they only put him out there when they figured the game was over and done with. The Stony Brook game and the Colorado game, a 16-point margin with, 6 minutes left? Yeah, 6 minutes left. I don't understand why you put Anthony Brown back in when you're up by 16. And Ty Thompson, yeah, he did make a bad read on that, made a bad throw. But that's something you want to give him the chance to bounce back from. That's what I really didn't understand about, why you put Anthony Brown back in the game. And so, yeah, I think he just deserves a chance. It's hard because, like you said, it's a new offensive system, some new faces on the offense, personnel wise. And then you go out there and game one is against Georgia. It's kind of a scary thought throwing a guy who's never started a game out there. And it's, but maybe that's a risk you want to take because, you have faith in this guy. I totally agree with this comment about not playing him in the Pac-12 championship game. I was losing my mind about, Anthony Brown still being out there in the second half when it was kind of over and done with. And even the Alamo Bowl, I don't even think Anthony Brown should have started that game, in my opinion. But I think Ty Thompson, for me, is, a guy who you're going to see just come out with this edge in spring. And I think he has to, because, a lot of people are just kind of assuming Beau Nix is going to be that guy and just saying the competition's over. And it's not, because there's still a lot of talent behind him. And, I really like Ty Thompson as a guy who's going to lead this football team. I'm super excited to see what he looks like in spring. Because I liked what I saw, the Stony Brook game, and I liked what I saw in the spring game. It's just, there's things that you can fix. I think there's easy fixes, but it's just a little bit that we've seen, and it's, people are just kind of holding on to that. And we should have seen more. I think that's really all I'm trying to say. We should have seen so much more last year.
Totally agree. And I think another part of that too is, it's funny because I feel like it's a similar conversation since I'm a Niner fan. Now people are saying, like, we don't know if Jimmy G is going to be gone next year. I pray to God that Jimmy Garoppolo is not a 49er next year. But then it's a whole conversation that people are having, like, oh, is Trey Lance ready? And then it's like, now you look at the the Ducks, excuse me. Is Ty Thompson ready? How much has he grown from year one to year two is going to be, I think, one of the biggest questions. And for the most part, it's tough because how can this staff really go about answering that question since they weren't here last year, since we have so many new faces? And you can watch all the film you want, but again, I'm not trying to sound like a pessimist here, but I just feel like that the more I think about it, I feel like it is a significant factor that, they're not having that offensive consistency. And I think that might be part of the reason that it's been so tough for Oregon to kind of break through, into that upper echelon, that next tier of college football teams. But like, you look at the game that Jim Moorhead had against, Ohio State, that was one of the best games he called all year. So I think that's maybe I'm getting a little sidetracked here, but I'm definitely excited to see what Ty has in store, because I covered him a lot throughout the recruiting process, and I'm excited to see, how does he rally a team around him? What does he look like in that spring game, and how much is that spring game gonna, influence the decision that these coaches, ultimately end up making? I think that'll be another factor as well, seeing kind of how the teams are composed, because then you have to look at, okay, is it kind of a first string offense versus first string defense? I doubt that's what it's going to be like, but there's just a lot of factors at play here. Quarterback's a position that the Ducks got to hit on, and I think they definitely have some guys that are more than capable in that room. And there's one more that we got to talk about, but I don't want to depart from Ty too early if we still have some more that we want to say.
I was just watching his the spring game a little bit, some of his highlights just before we hopped on here, and he's a guy that can absolutely rip it. I love his arm power. I think the one thing that I really want to see, if it was my number one thing for him, is just making his progressions and just using his eyes. Because sometimes you see him kind of stare down receivers a little bit in the spring game. Saw it against Colorado. It's where the pick came into play. Just because he kind of stares people down. And look, he was a true freshman last year. You're not expecting a guy to be, Aaron Rodgers out of the gate. I know I keep saying Aaron Rodgers. You brought up the 49ers. I might as well bring up.
Talk about our teams.
Yeah. You can't really expect him to be a guy who's just, got it all figured out. And so you're going to see him make those mistakes. And if he's the guy again, you're going to see him make those mistakes because he's being thrown out into the fire a little bit. And really anybody is. And so is the guy that we're going to talk about. But, I think there's little things to fix with Ty Thompson, but he's got some of those intangibles, like you said, stepping up in the pocket, trusting his offensive line, trusting his arm to make some of those throws. I really like the risk here. If Oregon decides to go with him, it's just, like you said, it's really hard to see them go, against a guy who started 3 years in the SEC and, has such of a connection with the offensive coordinator. It's hard in my mind to see, them going with Ty Thompson, but Man, could you imagine what Oregon Twitter would be like if before that Georgia game they say Ty Thompson's the starting quarterback? Man, that would be an event to say the least.
Man, that'd be wild. I feel like I saw another comment that I maybe want to talk about here in a second, but let's introduce the last guy that we want to talk about. Last but certainly not least, Jay Butterfield. It's the name that I think everyone just kind of buries in the quarterback discussion. Because you look at the game that Robbie Ashford had last year in that spring game, the hype that Ty came in with the program. But Jay Butterfield was a pretty highly rated quarterback coming out of high school in his own right. So I think he's certainly worthy of a mention and some discussion here in the quarterback room. He's the tallest quarterback on the roster. I think he's 6'5", 6'6", around there. And he definitely resembles more of the pro style quarterback. With what Ty and Beau kind of look like with their skill sets, looking like they're more kind of dual threat kind of guys. But even with Butterfield being the traditional passer, teammates, I feel like all last year at the press conferences when we were asking about the quarterbacks, they were quick to defend him and say, just because he's tall and a big dude doesn't mean he can't, he has some wiggle to his game when he needs to make some plays on the ground. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with, I feel like most modern college football quarterbacks being dual threat. Like, I feel like that's kind of what most people go for at this point. We were talking about Trevor Lawrence earlier, and I feel like he wasn't too much of a dual threat quarterback. At least that's not what he was known for. He had some pretty nice runs. I think he had a really long run in one of the natties, if I remember that correctly. But I say all that to say that you don't need a dual threat quarterback to be successful. It's just a little hard to figure it out which one fits better because we don't know what Kenny Dillingham's offense is going to look like. But if he's talking about fast pace, up tempo, then I feel like you kind of lean more towards a dual threat quarterback. But I feel like Butterfield might be the best pure passer in this room, just from the throwing motion that I've seen that from him. When we've been able to see him throw in person. So just kind of, again, similarly with Ty, even more so, we just haven't really seen him get a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the thing with Trevor Lawrence, and you said in one of those natties. I'm like, oh gosh, what a pleasure that would be, just to say one of those national championship games that they were in. No, I absolutely loved what I saw from Jay Butterfield in the spring game. And I know you got to watch him a little bit as well in person. And I mean, my goodness, he's got a really, really good touch on the ball. Like that first snap, I think it was first or second snap of, that drive that he came in, he just threw an absolute beauty to Troy Franklin on the right, right in stride, right on the right sideline. He had a couple other ones that he was just kind of ripping it down the field. Maybe not the arm talent, maybe not the cannon arm that Ty Thompson has, but like you said, I think he's the best pure passer on this team. I think he was on last year's team too. If you go back that far, great size, 6'6", 220 in that area. I don't think he's completely helpless when he's out there on his own scrambling. He's got a little bit of athleticism to it, as Pat McAfee says, he's got some a sneaky athleticism. You like to see him get out there and run a little bit if he has to. I wouldn't be afraid to see that. But yeah, in terms of passing ability, if you want to kind of run that pro style offense, I think Jay Butterfield would be the best fit. But he has the least experience. And again, that's just what it comes down to, what the priority is for this coaching staff. Are they just going to lean on that experience because they've got it? Do they take a risk and look at the actual quarterback that they have? Because in my mind, Jay Butterfield is, maybe he's not the dual threat quarterback that you think would fit a more fast paced offense, but I think he's I think he's a complete passer. There's not a lot of throws in my mind that I don't think he can make. He's thrown it into some tight windows. He throws it on the numbers. He's got good zip to the ball, goes through his progressions, really, really poised and calm. Doesn't really get that happy feet. I felt like Ty Thompson had a little bit of the happy feet when he got out there in the regular season. Nothing that you should be really worried about, but I think, Jay Butterfield just seemed a little bit more poised in that regard to me. So I don't want people to count out Jay Butterfield at all. I'm trying to speak like I'm president of the Jay Butterfield fan club here, but I love the fact that he's, people are still including him, and not just like it's Beau Nix and Ty Thompson, and then there's Jay Butterfield. Like, I don't want it to be like that. It's, it's the three of them. They all have a shot at this, and Jay Butterfield, in my mind, was one I was a little scared when Beau Nix came in that he was going to transfer, just because so many people were talking about Ty Thompson as the future of Oregon football, and Jay Butterfield was just getting left out of those conversations, and maybe he's not going to make that too deep. And I just think he's a guy that does deserve a shot. And I'd hate to see him go, but if it's Beau Nix and then Ty Thompson throughout the year, and you kind of see him get buried again, then I feel like it would be best for him to see what else is out there, because Beau Nix has 2 years of eligibility. Maybe we're in the same situation again next year too.
Another thing that might be worth noting with Butterfield is he's been on campus the longest out of any of these quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
He was an early enrollee in the 2020 class, so he's been around this team the longest, which maybe is an underrated factor to be considered here when we're looking at the quarterback competition. Another thing just on Beau Nix is, because we're talking about it off air, I think, but he did have ankle surgery in November, so we don't totally know what he's looking like right now from a health standpoint. I'm not trying to insinuate anything. I'm just saying we literally don't know. So that could be a factor in this competition as well. And one of the kind of big picture things that I wanted to hit on again here is just with all these transfers coming in. I think I saw someone comment earlier on in the show saying, fans are tired of rotating quarterbacks all the time. I feel like some people maybe think that, if you do go with the younger quarterback, that you kind of have to sacrifice the season. And I think that might be why it's such a tricky deal for Oregon, because like we were talking about at the top, like it feels like they're one quarterback away, because like the rest of the roster is pretty solid. I know that the secondary is pretty young, and they need to have an edge rusher and a new edge rusher step up without KT. But the whole concept of like an investment in the future, which I think a lot of fans at this point would look at starting one of the younger guys. So Mikey G said here, Herbie went 4-8 his first season. That was acceptable as an investment in the future, seeing how well they did in the 2019 season. How did that pan out? So this was part of a bigger conversation in the comments, but I just thought it was a really cool perspective to kind of include in the show, as we kind of have this conversation about, will they go with the transfer in Beau Nix, or will they go with, one of the younger guys that they recruited out of high school in Ty Thompson or Butterfield, and invest in the future?
This was something I was definitely looking forward to talking about, because there was a lot of people that were saying, so you're saying we should go 4-8 if we start a guy like Ty Thompson or Jay Butterfield. And I think about like the 2011-12 transition from Darren Thomas to Marcus Mariota. 2011, they win the Rose Bowl, and then the next year they're 12-1 with Mariota in his first year. And one thing that I really want to think about is like, what would have happened if that coaching staff with Chip Kelly, what if the transfer portal was a thing? Maybe does Marcus Mariota ever get a chance that year? Do they get in a guy who's got a couple years of starting experience? And, does that just kind of start off a whole different era of Oregon football where they just kind of stick around to these experienced quarterbacks? That was a risk, because Mariota was a redshirt in 2011, didn't see any playing time really. And then they come in and they are, in my mind, I thought the 2012 team was as good, if not better, than the 2011 team. And so I really think that it's not that huge of a risk in my mind, just because there's so much talent around a guy like Thompson or Butterfield. If they are the guy, I just don't see a way that they go 4-8, 5-7. Maybe there's a little bit of a drop from last year. And again, that's probably a given no matter what happens, just because you're getting a new quarterback and a new system, whole new coaching staff. It might be hard to expect another 10-win season. Just generally speaking, trying to be as unbiased as I can be here. I just think that it's hard to just assume that making an investment in a guy who has no starting experience and not a lot of playing experience is just tanking in a sense, and just saying, hey, let's just get him going and him alone going, and then maybe we can put something together in the future. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good talent, already on board in Eugene, like you mentioned, Dylan. And then I also think, I don't know, I don't want to say it's like I don't want to put it out there that like I think Oregon's not going to do well next year, but like with a first year head coach, with overhauling so much of the staff, it makes sense to reason that there could be a little bit of a drop off with Oregon. I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but it would certainly stand to reason that maybe expectations shouldn't be as high as, after they beat Ohio State last year. I mean, people were thinking playoffs, national championship appearance, and I don't think that's necessarily the case here. So I'm sure we'll get more into that, with record speculation, schedule predictions, and all that good stuff. But maybe with a new head coach coming in, it feels like it would be the perfect time to go with one of the younger guys on the roster. But complicating the matter for a lot of people, I think, is this game against Georgia to start the year, because it is pretty daunting to put a first-time starter into a situation like that.
Well, yeah, Mariota's first game was against Arkansas State. If they played Alabama week 1, do you think Mariota starts? And if the transfer portal was a thing, do you think they, make a decision there? So it's just a totally different time of college football. You schedule these non-conference games that can kind of make or break your season almost if you don't win those. But again, it's nice that it's at the beginning of the year so they can try to make a vengeance of that 2019 run where they lost to Auburn week 1 and then kind of start running the table. And then, maybe they get a game like Arizona State. But I think the schedule is really tough. I know people were saying it's an easier one than last year. I don't know if I'd say that, just because, Utah's still probably going to be really good. You get them at home, which is good. Playing in, I'm going to sound like a lunatic, but playing in Tucson is not going to be easy. I know they've won one game in the last 2 years, but that team got a lot better, and it's hard to play in Tucson when you're the Oregon Ducks for some reason. Sorry, I had to say it, but it's just a curse for some reason to play in Tucson, just like it is to play in Tempe. And so it's going to be tough for any of the quarterbacks to come in there and, put up a kind of season like they had last year, where, they beat in Ohio State and they just kind of roll from there. And you just have to factor in the Pac-12. The Pac-12, in my opinion, got better this year. I think from head to toe, except for Cal. I think Cal got a lot worse. You just can't count out the cannibalistic factor of the Pac-12, where Oregon can come into, Boulder or go into Tucson and just kind of lay an egg. And, with a new coaching staff, whole new system, it's not, you can't just give them that game. You can't say like, hey, this team is way better on paper than Arizona. They're going to win that game. Anything can happen in the Pac-12, and especially if it's after dark, as we all know. So one of the comments said our expectations should be tempered but relatively high. Yeah, it's Oregon football. It's, you're definitely going to keep your expectations high. The Dan Lanning era, he's such a highly regarded head coach. He brought in this crazy good coaching staff from top to bottom. Expectations should be high. I think this is still a really good football team. It's just there's a lot of new to it. There's still a lot of youth, not just on the roster, but in the coaching staff. It's not going to be easy, especially when you have to play Georgia and BYU in 2 of your first 3 games. I just don't think you should be screaming national championship, Rose Bowl right away. Just try to keep those a little bit tempered, because, I'm not saying it's going to be 4-8, 5-7, but it probably won't live up to those crazy expectations that I've seen some people have. But give it time. I think this, if they get Ty Thompson some more playing time at the least, or Jay Butterfield some more playing time at the least, I think they'll be in a better shape going forward. But I don't think this is a national championship or break type of season in 2022, just because of how new everything's going to be.
Would have really been nice if one of those guys could have gotten some playing time in the Alamo Bowl, but that's not the situation that the Ducks find themselves in. for the schedule next year, I think that's the one thing that is favorable is a lot of their toughest games are at home. Definitely nice to have BYU at home. And I also think just when you're looking at the big picture, like obviously you want to win a game like the Georgia game, but if they were to lose that game, it's not the end of the world. Which maybe I think gives some reason for why you do end up going with a younger quarterback in that game. Because I know a lot of people are saying, you want to put Beau in that game because he's the most experienced guy, and that's a huge game, and it's got, it's another chance for Oregon to kind of, the whole put up or shut up type of deal like they did when they scheduled Ohio State. So we've talked about, all three guys on the roster. Feel like we've had some great conversation here, lots of awesome comments. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them today. Hopefully my internet wasn't too terrible, but we're just over an hour here, so we're going to kind of start winding down. On kind of a fun note, Rube, you got a new chair. How's that thing treating you?
Yeah, it looks like I'm a judge on The Voice, doesn't it? A little bit.
It's like you're ready to turn around and hit your
I know.
button and then turn around.
Yeah, it's pretty nice, isn't it? Yeah, my back is better off. So I'm wondering if you were going to make a comment about that. But yeah, I'm pretty relaxed. It's it's not like 15 years old anymore, so I'm very content.
I love to hear it because I need to get a new chair myself once I get back to Eugene. But any kind of final thoughts here on this quarterback situation that you wanted to add before we hopped on out of here?
I just have a feeling people are gonna say I'm like anti-Oregon. I'm a pessimist because I said keep your expectations low. I'm just waiting for the fan mail to come my way. But no, I'm just excited about the situation they're in. Even though it may not seem like it after what I just said. Beau Nix is one of those guys that, like I said, I think his ceiling is still pretty high. I don't think he's reached his potential. If he's the starting quarterback, I feel better than I did going into last year and even the year before with Tyler Shuck and Anthony Brown. I was a little bit lower on Tyler Shuck than some others were, going into that year. So I think Beau Nix is a guy that I'm excited for if he's the starting quarterback. I'm excited to see what the offense looks like. It feels like we say that every year because it feels like they're just running through offensive coordinators and systems. But I like Kenny Dillingham. I like that it's kind of built to maintain success. I feel like it's built to develop guys from, if it's Ty Thompson or Jay Butterfield, I feel like it would be set up for them to kind of grow in this offense and grow with Kenny Dillingham and Dan Lanning. So whatever happens, I'm excited. I don't think it's a lose situation if they start one guy over the other. I think there's more risk involved with starting one of the younger guys. But there was a risk in bringing in Beau Nix. And I'm excited that both Ty and Jay stuck around. And I'm excited to see who kind of comes out on top here.
Definitely excited to see kind of how this quarterback competition shakes out. I think that all three guys are definitely capable. It's not really a position where you're like, oh man, I kind of wish we weren't in this situation in terms of the talent that you have to choose from. I think all guys are capable. But it's something that's kind of become the norm here for the Ducks is, having a quarterback competition. So I think that's probably part of the reason that some fans want to go with one of the younger guys just for the long-term picture, looking for a long-term solution at quarterback. And then with Beau Nix being a guy that has 2 years of eligibility left, that's I don't know. I don't want to say it's complicated, but it's not your typical, transfer situation, I guess, that we've kind of come used to seeing grad transfers come in. But that's all we have on the quarterbacks. Dylan, where can people find more of you as we wind down here?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at DRK Sports News. Follow me on Instagram if you'd like at Dylan Reubenking. I believe that's what it still is. You can find my work on Ducks Digest and also find our work. I work with the Transfer Portal CFB, little college football site that we run, or that I run, called at TPortal CFB on Twitter.
Right on. If you guys want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter at that name on your screen there at Torres Sports. You can also follow Dish. I just made a new Twitter for the podcast. That's just at Ducks Dish. So definitely follow us over there. And we'll be posting some more of our podcasting content over there. And then you can also check out Ducks Digest forums. where we have some more discussion that we're kind of just trying to get going around the Ducks. And then obviously check out ducksdigest.com for all of our written content. And then check out some of our other podcasts. I just brought Dave Yulee on. He's a 2022 Oregon offensive line signee. The podcast is available here on YouTube if you want to stay on my channel and stick around and subscribe. And then you can also find it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So however you guys were tuning into this episode of the Ducks Digest podcast, really appreciate you guys stopping by and spending some time with us. We will catch you guys in the next episode. We're going to start looking at some of the other position groups, both with written content and here on the podcast. So you guys have that to look forward to. But for Dylan Reubenking, I'm Max Torres. We will see you guys in the next episode. Take care.